Hi, I'm Obi Joe. I'm going to instruct on how we build a fire. I'm not only going to talk about how we build a fire, but I'm also going to talk a little bit about some safety things to kind of keep in mind when building a fire, as well as just tips and tricks for if it's not like a gorgeous, beautiful, sunny day outside. So to kind of first start it, like I said, safety first. When you're building a fire, you want a really good area, right? You want a nice circle ring of rocks. You want to be able to have your fire contained. You want to make sure there's not a whole lot of shrubs and things like that around. So like if you do have little shrubs, you can always kind of like, get them out of the way, kind of clear the area out just in case. You don't want any sparks catching fire of any of this. So you'll just kind of clear the area out a little bit, make sure it's nice and safe. The second point, you want to have a bucket of water, all right? In our bucket of water, we actually have what's called a critter stick. This critter stick is so that critters can hop down your stick, drink some water, and hop back out. That way, your critters don't get lost in this bucket of water. So always good for your critters. We also want to look out for their safety. So make sure you have that. Second, you want to make sure you have no loose articles of clothing or anything like that, long hair, stuff like that. So I'm going to go ahead and tie mine back. All right, so next, we're kind of got that safety feature. We got this safety feature. We've tied back any loose articles of clothing. I like to always have a good pair of gloves when fire building. Mine are a bit used and worn, but get yourself a nice pair of gloves. Leather is always good. Next, you want to make sure to double check with your local fire district to ensure that you're not on fire ban. All right, a lot of different counties have a lot of different fire bans, but every district has their own stages of the fire ban. So always make sure to check with the local fire district where you're planning on having your campfire or building your fire to ensure that it is okay to do so. So, the proper technique. There are so many ways to build a fire, right? There's teepees, there's kind of different log cabin methods, there's pyramid methods. We're going to talk about all those. But first, I'm going to introduce you to all the different types of kind of wood and different fire materials that you're going to need when building a fire. First is what we call the tinder, and that's all this stuff, right? This is that like real, loose kind of easy lightable stuff that you essentially call fire starter stuff. I also found these really cool pine cones. Recent pine cones, pine cones smoke really bad because of the sap, but what's cool about these ones, these are just recently fallen off of a ponderosa, and you can see the beautiful sap. When we actually put these in the fire, it'll produce a really beautiful smell as well. It smells really good. Next is what we call our kindling. And this is our kindling right here. Little sticks. Sometimes the kindling can be about yay big as well, you can see. So some kindling might be the size of your hand, some kindling might be, the size of your forearm. Things like this, anytime you have like large pieces of kindling and stuff like that, you can always ensure that it's good and breakable when you hear that crunch snap, right? You don't want to be using like wet wood or anything like that. So make sure you're using wood that has that clean snap. All right, next is what we call fuel. And this is our fuel right here. You're gonna notice that I piled a whole bunch of charcoal fuel right here too that has previously been burned. Contrary to belief, this is some of the best fuel that you could possibly put in your fire because something that's already been on fire is gonna catch easily on fire. So what I love to do is save all that stuff that just kind of left in your fire, re-put that in as fuel. That's way great to start when building a fire. Next is just, again, more fuel that you can keep fueling your fire to keep it going. Cool. All right, next, I'm gonna talk about a safe way to break some of these sticks and some of these logs. You might have seen like at home, like parents, stepping on the log or breaking with their knee, things like that. But I'm gonna show you a pretty cool way and an easy way to break it without, you know, hurting you and getting yourself into trouble. So, follow me this way. So, I have a nice big log right here. What's also kind of cool about this log is you can also see like the spiral motion that kind of goes up and how it's kind of formed this aspen. That's actually the cause of lightning, which is also pretty cool. So just like a little tidbit. But we want to use this nice piece of wood to help fuel our fire. So what we're going to do is, I don't have a saw with me, so I want to break this, but I want to break it in a safe manner without stepping on it or like banging it against a tree, things like that. So what you're going to do is essentially create kind of like a lever system, right? So you want to give the stick leverage. So we're going to actually stick it in between these two trees, like so, and we're going to push with our body weight. And what that's going to do is push the stick and it'll break it in two, all right? You can keep doing it until you have the size in which you're trying to achieve. Just like so. Cool. So now we'll take a couple of these pieces of fuel back to our fire and get this fire started. Now, to build our fire, we want to start with some tinder. Like I said, there's a whole bunch of different methods. The methods that I'm going to show you first are going to start with our tinder. So one thing I love to do is you can just kind of start with like a pile of tinder and build that into your fire right here. And just get a nice good pile going right there. Another method you can do is what we call the bird's nest, which is where you can get all this kind of roughage, and what you're going to do is essentially form it into a bird's nest, kind of like what a bird would do, right? A little bit of this in here. What's cool about the bird's nest is it gives your tinder a little bit of form, unlike just kind of like a pile of tinder sitting right there. So, just like that. Cool, so that's another method. We're gonna go ahead and set him right there for a moment. I'm going to show you from this pile of pine needles how to build what we call a teepee structure off of this pile of pine needles. So we want to grab our tinder, or our kindling. What we're going to do is create a teepee structure around this grouping of pine needles. I'm going to throw some of these little guys just kind of around the side. Like so. And that would be our teepee structure. After you light the fire and get it going, that's when you're gonna start adding your fuel to this particular fire. But you don't wanna get it started on there just yet. But once this really gets going, that's when we can do that. Next, I'm gonna show you the log cabin method. I'm gonna keep this grouping of pine needles to show you log cabin. And it's exactly like it sounds. You're gonna make a log cabin by layering the sticks around your pile of pine needles. Make it a bit smaller. And just like so. All right, when you light this guy, you're gonna come just right under here again, get this going, and then once that starts going, again, you're then gonna add the fuel to your fire. All right, next, I'm gonna show you what is called the pyramid structure. For a pyramid structure, we're actually going to use the fuel to start with. So I'm gonna grab all this pine needle wreckage. I'm back over here. We're gonna layer these guys down. We still want to give room because we definitely want to still get oxygen in between these logs. And then we're gonna take next. Let me grab some more of these guys. And you're gonna layer these, your bigger pieces of kindling, onto your fire like so. Next, we'll take some of the smaller guys that I grabbed here before. Get these even smaller guys layered. And then we're gonna take this bird's nest that I made and we're gonna pop him right on top, actually just like so. And what happens is when you burn this, it slowly goes down and it'll eventually start fueling your fire. What's nice about this one is you don't have to then be sitting here constantly like, okay, now should I put on fuel? Now should I put on fuel? This just naturally burns down to the fuel, which is also kind of cool about this. Next, you can always do a method of all three. All right, so we can start with our A-frame here. We can build a little bit of a log cabin around him. I might save that one. Like so. And then create a teepee. And just like so. And there we are. There's also a method of all three. Next, to light our fire. When you're striking, you always want to strike away from yourself, never towards yourself, just another safety measure. So, striking away from ourselves, we're gonna let that light. We're gonna come in here, kind of get under that tinder to get them lit. And now he'll start going. So as everybody knows, a fire needs oxygen, right? And what a lot of people like to do is get real down and deep, get real close and blow on your fire. For me, I like staying a bit further away from the fire and grab something like the lid to a Tupperware or a piece of cardboard or something like that. And what you can do is just give your fire oxygen by just fanning this. What this is doing is allowing me a safe distance away from my fire to give the fire that oxygen that I know it needs. I don't know about you, but my lung power isn't that powerful. So there's our fire. So, couple tips when it's like really rainy or like bad weather or something like that. It can be really difficult to get a fire started. Of course, number one thing, you want to have dry wood, right? You want to have dry kindling, you want to have dry tinder, you want to have dry fuel. Sometimes that's not always the case, right? So we want to try and keep it as dry as possible. So what you can do is, let's say you know that it's going to be a rainy day or something. Again, you can always use this guy to kind of help cover. But what's also nice is the stuff that you really need dry is going to be all of this tinder right here, right? We're going to want to keep this tinder and all of this good kindling nice and dry. So what we're gonna do is kind of just like pile all this on top of each other. And then we're gonna take my fuel, we're gonna layer on top. What this is doing is creating a shield for what is underneath the fuel, as well as the fuel is gonna help shield from itself as well. So you can kind of see, this is one way to keep it dry. All right, just like so. Again, when it's raining outside, you're gonna need a lot more oxygen. So having something like this is going to be vital for that. Next, one thing I like to always do, grab it, is have a plastic baggie on hand for when it does rain. And what you can do to keep all of that tinder nice and dry that's in here, you're just gonna keep it in the plastic bag to keep it dry. Keep your plastic bag nice and closed for when, you know, trying to build your fire and get everything that you need to get going for it. When it goes time to actually build the fire, you're gonna keep all this tinder inside the plastic bag. And so when you go to light your tinder, you would just come in here with a match and light it from here. All right, again, that's in the event of like really bad weather. So a rainstorm, things like that, where you know you need a fire, but you're finding it really difficult to try and start one. I like to keep it in here, and that will help keep that tinder nice and dry. And again, I'll be able to use some of that stuff that I've created a shelter for under here. Next, when it is raining, things like that, what can happen a lot of times is when the water is coming down and it's gonna pour into your fire pit, you always wanna make sure to have some kind of place where the water can go out. All right, so here in this pit, you'll see like different holes and stuff that also help kind of keep the water out of this fire pit. But essentially what you wanna do is always make sure you have some kind of downstream that is going out for the water that's piling inside of your campfire. So now that we got our campfire going, I don't know about you, but my favorite thing about having a campfire is, of course, roasting a marshmallow. So I'm gonna go ahead and roast a marshmallow. If you haven't, we recommend that you go and check out our video on solar oven s'mores. That if you're not able to get a campfire at home, we would love to have you join us with a solar oven s'more. So, get my marshmallows on here. I like my marshmallows nice and golden brown. So I'm gonna kind of try and get it nice and low and roast it from down here instead of just like sticking it straight in the flames. I'm gonna move around. As you can see, the wind is kind of changing. I'm just gonna move around to keep myself safe, to ensure I'm not in the wind's path. All right, now I've got a nice, beautiful, toasty brown marshmallow. That's good. That is really good. I don't know if I can finish this one. I might set this one aside. So I previously mentioned, I personally am a fan of having a nice, good smelling campfire. I love the smell of a campfire. Why not enhance it a bit? Here in Colorado, we have lots of different roughage on the ground. I gathered a whole bunch of different types of sage. So as you can see, I've got 3 different types going on right here. And so what I'm gonna do is, once I have my fire going really well, I'm gonna go ahead and put this sage in here. One thing the sage is also gonna do, not only is it gonna give me a nice, beautiful smell, but the burning of sage is also gonna keep those bugs away, like mosquitoes and stuff. So as you'll see, I'm tending the fire with my critter stick because it's also been soaking in water. So I can stick it right back in the water, keep myself safe also from having a burning stick waving around. Next, I told you about those awesome pine cones. I'm excited to put those in. They're gonna smell so good. It just smells so good. Okay. The sage and the pine cone are gonna smoke really bad, but once you have a good fire going like this, you're not gonna really be able to tell. But that smoke is gonna produce that wonderful scent, like I said, that's gonna keep all those bugs away. So, and there you have a beautiful Colorado campfire. All right, for extinguishing your fire. Again, you wanna make sure that you have a bucket of water. You want your critter stick. I'm also gonna grab myself a shovel. So you wanna have these tools on hand when ready to extinguish your fire. So, I'm gonna take that critter stick out. And what we're gonna do is what is called the sprinkling method. So, I'm gonna gather some water into my hand and just sprinkle it. Once I got a good sprinkling, and you can tell it's still kind of smoking, what that means is it's still hot. There's still probably something going on in there, hot coals. I'm gonna take my shovel, kind of break up my fire, right? I wanna smother it in there, down in the ground. Expose all those coals down in there. Keep sprinkling. And the reason we want to sprinkle and not just pour water over is because what if in about an hour I need to rebuild another fire? Maybe I'm having a cookout, need lunch, something like that. So if I just take this bucket and pour it, it's gonna drown out my fire pit and all of these logs. I don't want it to drown it out. I want to just extinguish it. So you can tell, I know that my fire is being more and more extinguished as the smoke is leaving. I'm gonna get back in here. So what I'm looking for is no more smoke. And then here in a second, I'm gonna kind of get my hand right here. And if I feel any heat coming off of these logs, that's also what I don't want, right? We wanna try and get all that heat down and all that smoke down. You can also kind of hear a sizzling sound. So I'm gonna sprinkle a little bit more. Nice. Pretty good. And there we go. And that's how you do it. Another key factor is a lot of people are tempted to now clean out their fire pit. Some of these logs might still burning interior, like on the interior of them. So we want to wait until the fire is completely extinguished, meaning you're not seeing any more smoke. There is zero heat left in these logs to the point that you could just pick them up with your bare hands before we go putting them into the ash bucket. Once the fire is completely extinguished, meaning typically about a day later, right, is the safe time to then clean out your fire pit, dig all these big logs out and all that ash, and they can go right into a designated ash bin. Right? But if we're pulling hot coals onto this ash bin, it's just gonna light this ash bin on fire. So we wanna wait for that to be completely extinguished before we go putting our hot coals in this ash can. So there we go. And there is fire building. Remember, we wanna keep our critter stick in our bucket of water right here. Again, so those critters can go up and down and help themselves to a little bit of mountain spring water. And there you go, there's fire building. Thanks so much for joining me.